is sore. Sorry, the little memo recording popped up. But the topic really does go much deeper. Most equestrians are wired to set goals, large, small goals, it doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, those goals need to match the horse and rider. And if they don't, the horse's needs and capabilities need to come before our personal goals. This was one of the first lessons I learned with my first pony. He had an injury that kept him from continuing to jump. So I had to decide if I wanted to sell him and keep working towards my jumping goals or change my goals and keep him. And I chose the latter and thankfully switched to dressage, which was the best decision ever. But later in life, I faced similar decisions as I owned and leased other horses. But putting the horse first doesn't always mean changing your personal goals, which is also something that I learned. Putting your horse first can also mean that they have maxed out in their abilities, and it's okay to find a different situation that keeps them physically healthy as you advance towards your goals, such as selling, leasing, or donating a horse to Dressage4Kids. So over my years training horses, I've been blessed to ride with some amazing trainers. However, not every trainer was the best fit for each horse. Maybe they were brilliant with horses that weren't emotional rides, but they had way too much energy to work with really sensitive horses. And so it's important to recognize that you might love your trainer, but your horse maybe doesn't. And any good trainer will appreciate you advocating for your horse. So it's always best to speak up if you ever have concerns. To this day, I always take trainer personalities and systems into account when my clients want clinician recommendations. It's nothing personal. It's just about setting your horse up for success and putting their needs first. Another way the horse comes first is through your maintenance program. Invest in a good team. Like, I really can't emphasize that enough. Being proactive and having quality relationships with your vets, farriers, saddle fitters, nutritionists, masseuses, you name it. These will cost less than hiring random people with no consistency. Having a dedicated team also helps when training because you have a team that knows your horses. So if a problem arises, it's caught before the problem escalates. And this leads me to knowing when to call it a day. If you've been practicing something really hard for a couple rides or the last few weeks or something, and your horse finally gets it, go on a hack. Like, stop the ride and let them relish in that excitement that they did something really good. Horses can feel our emotions from several feet away. And that means when we come to the barn after a stressful day at work or school, it's our job as horse owners to leave that stress in the car. And if you can't leave that stress outside the barn, go for a walk or a run before you start grooming your horse. While horses can be your de-stressor, they're not your emotional punching bag. And if you find you have a short fuse while riding one day, take a moment, walk on the buckle, practice some breathing exercises before picking the reins up again. Or maybe ask your trainer to ride that day if you can't keep your emotions together. And that's okay. The same goes, though, for nerves at a horse show. Know what your horse needs to be relaxed and what you need to be relaxed. And be honest with your trainer so that they can help you. Maybe your horse doesn't settle in well, so you opt for day shows instead of overnight shows. Or maybe braiding makes you nervous. I mean, it used to make me incredibly nervous until I was a part of the WIP program, and one of my friends taught me a much better way to braid. But at any rate, instead of spending 30 minutes anxious braiding and stressing your horse out the whole time, hire someone to braid and spend those 30 minutes centering yourself by doing yoga, practicing your breathing, whatever it is to help you be present for your horse and put their needs first. Choosing shows to enter based on their footing and stall safety are also incredibly important. A qualifying score really isn't worth a re-injured suspensory or a torn muscle. scratch your test if a torrential downpour makes the footing unsafe. Like, yes, it financially hurts. Yes, it could change the outlook of your goals. And it has. And it has for me in the past, where I had to make the choice, to pull out of a show because the footing just was unbearable. But, the same also applies for training at home and your turnout surfaces. Try to think of ways to maximize your resources so that your horses are not susceptible to injury because of sloppy, slick, extremely deep, super hard ground. You don't need the most expensive footing or drainage systems. As much as they all are nice, it's not realistic for everyone's budget, but consistent maintenance and safety is key to keeping our horses' bodies healthy. Lendon always says, advocate for your horse. And that's something that I have kind of kept near and dear to my heart ever since we started riding together. And by the way, Lendon, that apparently was 10 years ago. So that's a long time going. But anyway, so there certainly are challenges to this mantra, especially when sponsors or owners, parents, etc., are pushing towards their agendas. But, caring for horses is also not cheap. But no matter what decisions we make, we have to do our best to listen to our horses and advocate for their health and safety at all times. So I don't know if there's any questions or whatnot. I guess Mary or Lendon will handle that, but I will give the floor back to Lendon so you can hear from two incredible women who exemplify Lendon's mantra to perfection, in my opinion. So Lendon, thank you for having me.
Alexa, thank you very, very much. And Alexa has agreed to answer questions. If anyone would like to contact her by email, Mary, maybe you could put her email up in the chat. Is that correct, Alexa?
Yep, absolutely.
Yes. So if anyone has any comments or questions for Alexa, you'll see shortly her email in the chat section. So we move on now. Sorry, I just got an email. And I'm not going to do any long introduction to these amazing women. Adrienne, Lyle, Sabine, Schut-Kery. Hopefully you're all on because you know of their tremendous success and how beautifully they represented us this summer in the Olympics. But what we'd really like to know, perhaps we can start with you, Adrienne, is kind of how you started out in horses in dressage, and what was the beginning of your journey to what culminated to this point this summer? Oh, we can't hear you.
There we go.
There.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes, we got you.
Perfect. Well, my journey started way back. I think like a lot of people on here, I was just a girl who loved horses. It was definitely not dressage focused starting out. I grew up on a cattle farm. We had horses just in the backyard that lived with the cows, and I was always just drawn to them. I started out riding Western, and then I decided I wanted to learn to jump when I was about 7. And so I joined the United States Pony Club. And that was kind of my first introduction to any sort of formal training. We had a great little local chapter. We met once a month for group lessons. And so I did that for many years of my childhood. Through that, I was introduced to dressage and just fell in love with it. Mostly, I think, because it was so challenging. I was on my own, in the middle of a 300-acre farm with no teachers and no instructors other than once a month. But I would get every dressage book and every VHS dressage tape I could find, and I'd watch it over and over and over. And then I'd go out and get on my pony and I'd try to replicate what was going on in the videos, usually with absolutely no success. So I'd go back and watch the videos again. And I just found it really fascinating. I met Debbie McDonald, who's been probably for sure the biggest influence in my career. When I was in college, I started writing her emails and essentially begging her for lessons. And she finally agreed to let me trail her in for a lesson. So I loaded up my horse from college and drove down there, took my 2 lessons that I'd saved up for and was going to turn around and drive back to college. And they ended up offering me a working student position for the summer. So I started there just cleaning tack, grooming horses, and in exchange for being able to take more lessons and having some sort of consistent training was invaluable. Like all of a sudden I was able to make advancements much more quick, and then eventually turned into a full-time job working for them.
Okay. Sabine, you had a slightly different route, I think. How did it start for you?
It started, my sister took me to the barn and introduced me to our local pony club when I was about 10 years old. And yeah, looking back, I mean, that was really living and breathing horses all day. And it became like really my second family. Like I remember just spending all day at the barn and not really having the money for lessons nor my own horse. So we cleaned stalls and in exchange we could ride. But it was a very well-structured pony club, and so we, went to compete, and it was very jumping, dressage. We did lots of like trail riding and all these little activities as a group. So I remember that was really fun. And then the other half of the pony club was a gentleman that was the first to import Friesians from Holland and Spanish horses and Andalusians from Spain. And he wanted to promote the breed. So for the ones that got too tall for the ponies, we were able to ride for him the horses. And it took me a interesting route because I got a lot of opportunities to work with some different trainers to teach horses to lay down and sit and rear on command. And they were also really big in carriage driving. So I got my silver driving badge where you have to drive a 4-in-hand, which was really, really fascinating. I always thought driving was, first I thought it was boring, but they really asked the same that we do in dressage, but obviously only reins and whip. So it's really fascinating. You just, I just was really lucky to have gotten into that group of young girls to experience all of that. And then I took a little break and I did a 3-year apprenticeship with Jan Bemelmans. And then, but the warm bloods wasn't my thing back then. And I missed this group, and I missed these, I don't know, fairy tale horses. And went back and just had fun because of that versatility, what we did with the horses. I really enjoyed that, and learning all these different things about what you can do with horses. And we did a lot of fun traveling shows all over Europe to promote the breeds all over Europe. One particular show I remember that was really fun, we did a tour with the Lipizans from Lipizza, and we combined, like, for example, 6 black Friesians and 6 Lipizans, and we did a quadrille. Or we had one Friesian that was close to Grand Prix, and then their Grand Prix horse, and we did a pas de deux, stuff like that. So yeah, that pretty much, I stuck with that actually until 2005, when I moved to Los Angeles, and then I started to compete a little bit more. Yeah.
I've got 13 kids down here right now, and when I asked them the first day how many of them wanted to compete internationally or go to the Olympics, I think 9 or 10 of them raised their hand. When you were teenagers, was the Olympics your goal, Sabine, first?
But for me, not.
No.
Sanseo was the one that got me into that. Yeah.
How about you, Adrienne? Was that a goal when you were a pony clubber? Oh, you need to unmute.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't know why it keeps muting me. Sorry.
yeah, okay.
Um, y- yes, but not really, not as a tangible goal. I'm very self-competitive, and I wanted to learn everything I possibly could, and I wanted to unlock this kind of mystery of dressage that I had learned about, and I wanted to become the best like rider that I could. Growing up on a farm, it was like so intangible, these horses that you'd get the posters of in the magazines and stuff, passaging down the Olympics, that I didn't honestly see. We weren't from a financial place where we were ever going to be a horse show family. And so I didn't really think that was a realistic goal. So no, riding in the Olympics was not my goal. My goal was to always find a way to be able to make a living working with horses. That was pretty much my main goal my whole life. It's turned into be so much more than I ever imagined. But as long as I was going to be able to make a living working with horses, I was going to be happy.
So Sabine, you mentioned when Senseo came into your life, that's when the Olympics started to loom on the horizon. Am I accurate with that? And how did that come about?
Well, it definitely came later on. I mean, I think, and that's just how I function. I always tell this story. When I bought my first horse, I was riding second level and I've never ridden third level. So for me, it was not like, oh, I want to ride Grand Prix. It was, my goal was to ride third level. And so with Senseo, yeah, I think our biggest hope was really to hopefully get a Grand Prix horse. But when we bought him, I mean, no, national Grand Prix, maybe a little CDIs, but not riding for my country and in a team format. That came later. I mean, that came when he was, well, he surprised us. I mean, he did go qualified as a 5 and 6 year old in the young horse championships in Germany. So yeah, I guess he did. I think like 5, 6 year old, it started to look like more and more. But then you still don't know how are they for the Grand Prix in the Piaf Passage, right? And so, yeah, I think step by step we had more and more. He showed more and more how much quality he had.
So Adrienne, you were working for Debbie McDonald, and where did it start? How did it start? Where did it start looking like international competition was going to be for you?
Yeah, well, I came on board as a groom essentially, and learned so much just by being around that environment. It was the first time in my life where I could kind of make the bridge between being a competent rider versus how do these people get to the international stage. And it really wasn't this great big mystery. There was kind of concrete steps they followed, and that was really fascinating for me to watch. I started out just grooming, and my first time I had a chance to ride there was actually with some of the hunters. If the hunter trainer, because Debbie's husband shows hunter jumpers, if they weren't able to come for the day, they said, do you want to get on and hack one of the hunters? And I was absolutely, I will get on anything. Like I will ride the cow that's in the field if you let me. So I was able to hack some of the hunters, and then the timing was also just very fortunate as well. Debbie had an amazing international career. Her sponsor enjoyed buying 3 and 4 year olds at the Hanoverian auction. That had kind of been their business model. And Debbie was getting to a place where she was thinking, maybe I don't want to be riding all the 3 and 4 year olds. I would love somebody to kind of, knock around on the young horses and get them going for her to be able to take over. And so that opened up a really great niche that I was really excited. I love the young horses, and it was able to take a little bit of burden off Debbie. And then from there to get the riding opportunity, it just kind of slowly over the years progressed. It was not something that I expected or demanded ever in any sense. If I was able to sit on a horse, I was super thrilled. If I was cleaning tack and stalls all day, that was also fine because that was my job. And so I think allowing it to progress slowly is what made that relationship key.
And did it make, what was your reaction? How did it change your training or whatever when the Olympics were postponed? Adrienne, you want to start?
Yeah, I can start on that one. It it was for sure kind of like you get the rug yanked out from under you, because up until they made the call, everyone has all their theories and this and that, it's going to get canceled, it's going to go on. But up until the IOC actually says it's being canceled, you have to still be preparing as if it's going forward. Your horse still needs to be in top shape. So it was like, it was a little weird to be training, for the biggest competition and then knowing very well that it might not happen. And then when that decision was made, I think all horse people are so used to plans being changed with horses. I mean, nothing ever goes as planned. So it was just like, okay, now the Olympics aren't this year. Now let's pull out our calendars again. Let's map back, start this whole thing over. For my horse, at least Salvino, we've kind of learned over the years what his best show prep is. The less we show him, the better he seems to perform. He is not a horse that needs to get in a ton of environments. He's totally unfazed by things going on around him. So we kind of mapped back and said, okay, how do we rest him now? And then how do we peak again closer to the Olympics if they go on next year?
Sabine, how did that affect your brain and your training?
Well, I have a little bit that issue that I'm like a perfectionist, meaning people have to push me a little bit sometimes around me. Okay, you need to show, because I always want to, I know we all want that, of course, make it always better. So for me, in my head, it was almost like, phew, okay, I have a little more time to make it better, hopefully. So I honestly, I have to agree, or felt the same in a lot of ways as Adrienne was saying, that, you're preparing anyways. And it wasn't too big of a deal for me, I will say that. And looking back, it did work out. It did give us a little more time, because in 2018, I also lost a couple of seasons. So for me, it actually gave me just a little more time to get to know more the little quirks, what works best for Sanseo and I, to also make him peak and things like that. So I felt I gained a little bit more.
When you're, I don't know if this is a good question or not, but when you're generally training and bringing your horses up, and I'm asking sort of how you look at it mentally, and when you are, is there a difference, or where does the difference come when it's the training and we're showing and we're doing the best we can, and oh, we might have a chance to go to the Olympics. We're getting pretty good. Is there a change in the way you do things when that comes into as a realization?
No,
okay, go ahead, Sabine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right, go ahead.
No, I try not to. I mean, of course, I think in your head, you want to go there mentally, and there is a little bit, maybe you put maybe pressure on yourself, but I will say I'm trying to always be that way. No, I try to really stay authentic to my plan, to my training at home, and just, I have this idea of, when I compete, I'm showing my product, what I have made at home. I put that in the ring and in front of a judge. So I'm not trying to think I have to be, how do I say that, better, I want to be the best I can be. And I just stay really zoned in and focused on that, and try to gain strength through that, and not veer off of some now there's 3 others, they fight for the same spot. Of course, I'm not saying that doesn't cross your mind, but I really try to stay focused on Sanseo and I, or my horse and I, being the best we can. And also take pride on, not pride, but don't lose the passion and the pleasure of figuring all these little things out to be good, and not get distracted by the aspect of the sport or a competition.
Adrienne, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with Sabine. I don't think there's anything you would do differently. If you're a serious trainer and rider, you're already holding yourself every day to these standards. It's not like we're just goofing off and not taking care of our horses and then turn around and say, oh, the Olympics are next year, I'm actually going to start trying. But that being said, even from the time you get a young horse, my goal has always been to try to make Grand Prix horses. That being the main goal. A lot of them will, for various reasons, maybe fall out along the way when you realize, like Alexa was talking about earlier, that maybe their bodies aren't going to hold up, or mentally that's not their game, and you have to be realistic about that and maybe find a path that they can be successful on. And so as you're kind of cultivating all these horses through the years to bring them up to Grand Prix, I think the ones that are destined to go to the higher sport or to the international side, they will kind of, the cream rises to the top. And I don't think I would do anything differently with a young horse saying I'm buying it as an Olympic prospect versus any other young horse. The training principles are still the same. You're certainly not going to put any more pressure on them throughout their young horse, or about their careers in general, because that's not going to get you any better results. So I think getting the chance to have a horse at the Olympic level is really important. Like Sabine said, you stick to your gut, you stick to your training routine, and if it works out and that all works with this horse into something that becomes internationally competitive, then that's wonderful. But otherwise, you're not going to force it.
As you get down to the wire where you're in the final trials and who's going to be the top 3 and 4, is there a way that you can deal with the mental pressure of that? Or does that bother you? Is it just more of the same? Surely there's a little extra pressure there.
For sure. There is for sure always a little extra pressure. I try to always remind myself that my job is to be there for my horse and to not let it convey to my horse that this is any different than any other ring we've ridden in. To him, it makes no difference. This is just another day. And so I always try to kind of just remind myself that my role is to stay there for him and to not let the pressure, to be the barrier from the pressure. I'd say from the outside world, it's my job to be the barrier between the pressure out there and my horse. And so that kind of mindset has helped me deal with that.
Sabine, do you have anything that,
No, as Adrienne said, it's, again, I would be lying if your mind doesn't sometimes wander off. I think we all deal, that's also a little bit something, we are athletes and at one point too. But again, we have an animal we work with, and really what always helps is just reminding yourself why we're doing that, and also always aiming for that ride again at home, your best ride, and producing that in the ring, and just staying focused on that and not getting distracted by the competition atmosphere, what that all brings. You said your question was, the being in contender on a team, but then there's other riders also trying for it. So just staying focused and not getting too much into that. And because in the end, what are you trying to accomplish? You're trying to get on that team. So you have to stay focused and you can't get distracted. I remember my first championship format was in Chicago, and it was, I went in the warm-up and all I did was look around and put myself down and saying, oh my God, all these horses are so much better. And I totally lost focus, and that taught me right away something I do until today. No, really stay zoned in and keep your eye on the ball. Look out for your horse, like Adrienne said, and that will hopefully produce your best ride.
I think that was even more important for this Olympics, because we didn't just go straight to the venue. We had the 10 days in pre-export quarantine in Aachen. So that's like 10 more days of watching everyone else train, and some people which train much harder than some of our, than a lot of us do personally, and being able to stick to your gut and know what you did to get there, and not start looking around at all these horses and thinking that you need to change anything going into the competition.
I'm guessing that most of us on this call watched you all at the Olympics and saw you competing, but we'd love to know any little behind the scenes stories of your stay in Japan, and maybe your trip over, or anything you want to tell us that's other than training horses. No, it was just all training horses.
Oh,
Focused.
not training horses?
I mean, we sat at the laundromat together a fair amount in Germany.
Okay.
That was exciting.
What was it like when you got there? And I mean, you were sort of in quarantine yourselves, except when you went to the venue. Can you tell us, Adrienne, a little bit about that?
I think part of why there's not so many other behind the scenes stories is because we were in quarantine this time. I did the London Olympics and it was much different. We were able to go watch the other sports compete. We were able to go sightseeing. And so there was a lot more that went on this one because of the COVID. Obviously, we were not allowed outside of our hotel room. It was, or our hotel, I should say. So it was our hotel, our designated shuttle, or the venue, and that was it. So we attempted to have our sweet little shuttle driver take us on a tour of Tokyo, but he spoke no English, and I'm not sure what we saw. We just kind of drove around in traffic for an hour. So other than that, we pretty much were just in our little bubble, and nobody was going to take a chance because nobody wanted to get a positive test and have our team eliminated. So we were super careful.
Anything, Sabine?
Yeah, no, maybe something horse related, maybe for I always love listening to other riders and those kind of stories, but I thought it just shows how you just never stop learning and why this all is so fascinating. But I remember with this new format, how it was kind of predicted who rides on the first day of Grand Prix and who rides on the second. And first, they told us that I would ride on the second day in the Grand Prix. And then a couple of horses didn't go through the jog, and then everything changed and I was on the first. So it threw my plan a little bit off, but I think that's fine. Again, makes it interesting if it works out well. But I remember that I had to change my plan and kind of last minute, because usually I don't train a lot of the lines or a lot of test elements. So it was really time, since I had one day less, to do that evening. And I remember riding Santeo and I thought, oh, I also want to wait until it's a little cooler. So I rode later. Well, I get in the ring and there's like, I can't remember, but a ton of horses in there and several different stallions. And so I couldn't ride any of the lines, but Santeo was really like hot and, you know, just not listening to me and tense. And I sat down and it was a question between, I didn't know, I thought it was me that I didn't ride him well enough. And I wanted to share that with my coach and mentor, Christine Traurig. And I sat down with her and I'm like, look, this is what I felt. And I think, you know, I need to do this or that better. Or what do you think? And she said, you know, she reminded me that there were so many horses in there and the different riding styles, and especially the stallions. She knows Santeo well. She said he picked up on that atmosphere, and that's why he was tense. And looking back and looking at the next day, she was right. So, I mean, even when you ride at that level, I think it's interesting to share these little things. You always learn, and it's not just the technical aspect of, oh, how did your half pass go? But that was a really emotional thing. And that's often with Santeo something I'm looking or have to look after. So it was it's interesting and so fun to also read their emotions and their personalities and all these things that affect a good ride. And like Alexa said earlier too, like even at home when you don't feel good, or leave the emotions at home. But even for the horses to read that, I thought was really interesting.
What's the plan for this year?
I would like to try for World Equestrian Games, and to get on the short list.
Which are next year, right?
No,
this year now.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, yes.
There is no down year because it got
That's
postponed.
right. I'm so sorry. Yeah. So we have this year a World Cup and a World Equestrian Games. Yeah. So
But
you're
I
going
should-
for the game.
Well, I should go step by step, right? First, you have to make it on the short list.
Yes,
So
but that's your, how about you, Adrienne?
Yeah, same as Sabine. With this being a World Games year, that would be my focus. And at least for Salvino, attempting to do a World Cup and a World Games in one year, I think would be too many qualifying competitions. So our goal is to try to get the scores necessarily to get on the short list for the World Games.
For the World Games. And then for those that make the short list, those riders will go to Europe to compete. Is that correct?
I don't even know if we know that yet.
Yeah,
Did I not read an email? I probably missed an email.
Well, with COVID, does anybody know
Exactly.
what's going to be happening anyway? So this may be a stupid question because you two have both competed at the very top levels of dressage competition, but in your journey to get here, is there anything looking back, even when you were young or not so young, that you think you might have done differently?
I mean, I guess if I was going to get very philosophical, I would say no, because it ended up really well. So I think if you were to change, were there a lot of mistakes? Absolutely. But I kind of believe that it all worked out. So maybe if I hadn't made all those silly mistakes along the way, it wouldn't have given me all the experience and character building opportunities that I have.
Was there a time, Adrienne, that you thought I'm not going to be able to do this, isn't going to work, I should go flip burgers at McDonald's or something?
No, for me, never. And I feel really lucky for that, because from the time I was a little kid, and I always tell this story, I remember being in school, we had to take like they do these tests to kind of give you some idea of like what career you might be good at. And I remember being like in third grade and telling my teacher, well, I don't need to do the test. Like, I already know what I'm going to do. And she goes, what are you going to do? I said, oh, I'm going to train horses. And they were like, oh, sweetie, that's not a job. Like, you have to take the test. You got to see what kind of job. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, that's what I'm going to do. But again, with my goal always having been just to be able to make a living training horses, I think that makes it a much more sustainable goal. I think if I'd, from the time I was little, said, all I want to do is ride in the Olympics, that becomes such a pinpointed goal that the Olympics are wonderful, but 99.9% of everything else that goes along with the horses is also wonderful. And if you're only going to enjoy that tiny little pipe dream, you're really, I don't think, going to be long for this sport, because more often than not, things don't work out just the way you had imagined them. And you have to, if you don't take joy in all the other paths, it's pretty tough.
Sabine, anything you would, going back, would do differently?
No, I think I finally came to peace and embrace it more. But often I thought I should quit. I wasn't good enough, but I also didn't always really wanted to make it a job. But it was part of, I mean, I would always write, but I always I didn't really want it to do as a job. But yeah, and there was often, oh, I'm not good enough, and it didn't work, and I beat myself a little up. But I do remember, I mean, it's funny, exactly the year, it was around 2004 or 2005, I finally let go, and that thought didn't come to my mind anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So some questions from our people watching. On what is your sort of weekly schedule like with your horses, training wise? And do you use walkers, treadmills, water treadmills, hills, swimming? Anything? Adrienne, you want to start? What's sort of your weekly schedule with your upper level horses?
Yeah, so I work, I should say, 6 days a week. They train like in the ring, dressage training, 3 days a week. We generally have Mondays off. On Tuesday, everyone just stretches. I think it's really important that their bodies get a day back just to get moving and get stretching before you demand stuff of them. I will often then train Wednesday, Thursday. We'll go out hacking on Friday, train Saturday, and then Sunday is generally like a fitness day. We have a big jumper ring. We have some hills in Denver. We have mountains down here. We created a hill. So, but I come from the eventing background. So for me, fitness is something that I feel like is often not really addressed in the dressage horses. And I think that it can be incredibly helpful. I've watched with Salvino, for example, he struggled. It took him a lot of time to gain the strength to be able to be consistent in the Grand Prix movements. He could show me a step or two and then he couldn't hold it. And just watching with his journey, how important fitness was, just cemented that even more in my mind, that we have to not be obsessed with trying to ride the movement until it's perfect. They're an athlete. A football player doesn't go out there and do a full game every time they practice. You know, they target skills, they target fitness, just making them all around their bodies being happy and healthy. And I think that's true. I don't think I would gain anything else by adding more training sessions into their program. They seem to get to where they were going at the same time as the ones that train harder more often.
So your Sunday sessions are trot sets or hills, whatever you can do, or?
Yeah, so my cousin is an event rider, Maya Black. She's quite a successful event rider. And I often just pick her brain. I'd be like, send me this week's schedule, you know, and she's like, this many trot sets and then this many minutes of cantering. And then I have cavalettis, some little low jumps. I don't jump anything higher than like cross rails anymore. But we also have a water treadmill, and most of my upper level horses go on that twice a week in addition to the walker. So I try to get them out and moving a lot, because I think that's super important. And the fitter they get, the more they need to be able to move.
Are your upper level horses turned out?
I'd say probably 70% of them. Some of them just don't like it, and so I haven't forced it. You know, they'll hand graze or I'll turn them in the round pen to have a roll and stuff. But the ones that enjoy being out, they go out, and the ones that look miserable out there and pace the fence and sweat the whole time, I don't make them do it.
Sure. Sabine, what's your weekly schedule sort of like?
Yeah, I mean, here in Florida, I have to make a better schedule, I would say. And this time I brought more horses. Usually I just went with Sanseo and then a couple of clients' horses. But let me say how it is at home. I work 5 days a week. And then the babies actually go 3 or 4 times a week, and the older horses actually as well. So nobody really goes the 5 days. And then depends on, they get turnout, but it's also like Adrienne said, we had such it depends if the horses like it, because we had such a drought in California, so there was no grass. And then so you have to get a little bit more creative, and the ones that like to really stand in the sun and it's beautiful weather there, at least they enjoy that with some hay. So I really try to do that. But other than that, what was really nice, because I had moved to Napa, and I hadn't had that luxury before. And the owners, they have also a big vineyard. So I could take Sanseo and literally really hike with him through the vineyards. And they had actually quite a big hill that went through a forest. And I would go by walk with him really up that hill and down that hill. Do stuff like that. But I think within the training, like with Sanseo, for example, or any older horse, sometimes, yeah, it's just a day where I look for lots of quality in the gaits. And then I add on another day a little bit, movements, exercises, but it all is more like however it comes. But the days of the riding don't go more than 4 days. And then jumping, like that's for me down here. We didn't have jumps out there. So here I already arranged, I want all my young ones to jump, for example, once a week. I think that's really important. Cavaletti work, really trying. And really it's also a little bit what the horses like. I have one stallion that's crazy about playing with the big ball. I mean, you can put him by himself we had a big lunging ring, and he'll play there the whole time. You don't have to do anything with that ball. And then I have others, they look at it and, have no interest. So it's a little bit trying to stimulate and do different things. Yeah.
So you've both talked about keeping your horses happy and so forth. How do you balance your personal life and your equestrian life?
Well, I'm very big. I'm very big on that. That's why I do take 2 days off, Like it's, but I also don't mind going full on when I have to. And here in Florida, you know, we just sat down and with Sophia and talked about, is it going to be 1 day or 2 days? And by myself, I said, well, here it's only going to be 1 day off. So it's not like that it comes out of laziness. It comes more out of, because I have other interests, and I just think I'm a better person, and I'm a better person for my horse if I have a little time for myself and my husband.
Yeah,
Adrienne?
that is definitely something I'm not very good at, I will admit. I am trying to get better. I got married this fall, and I'm like making a big attempt to like not to have a life besides just being with the horses 24/7. What is a little helpful for us is when we're in Florida, I kind of look at that. For me, we're here to do a job. We work all the time. It is what it is during season, but we take the horses to Colorado in the summer, and I don't generally take 2 days off. I'm going to try to, but at least give all my staff 2 days off so everyone gets a real weekend. And I think it's really important. I groomed for many, many years. So I try to make a big effort to let my staff have a life and keep hours that are reasonable and let them enjoy other things besides the barn. Because like Sabine said, at the end of the day, we're all better for our horses if we're not totally burnt out and frazzled. So it's hard because it would not come naturally to me. And I would be perfectly happy putting my head in the sand and just only doing the horses. So I have to constantly kind of half-haul myself.
What would you say, Adrienne, let's start with you. What would be the major, the quality that made your horse as special as he is?
I think Salvino has just an incredibly huge heart once he understands what you want from him. I would say he took maybe a little longer than some of my other horses to believe that he could do everything. But if you listen to him and you kind of went at his speed, like now he's such a teammate, you know, when I go in the ring, I feel like I could practically aid wrong for every movement. And he'd be like, I got it, mom. Like, no, this is what we're doing. He's just so incredibly tuned in that way. The horse that I took to the London Olympics, Wizard, was an amazing horse, but like the polar opposite, like hot-headed, quick to react, like always went away from his people. You know, he didn't focus on you. And so my job for him was like constantly wrangling his emotions. And then Salvino is like the other end of the spectrum. While Salvino is like just rock solid, and I can just have to sit there and make sure I'm doing my job right every step of the way. And that he's so incredible that way, that when you go in the ring, whatever else you've been working on, whatever, maybe we couldn't get the one tempies in warm up, every time we go in the ring, he just puts that issue aside and he's right there for me.
How about Senseo? What was the major quality that makes him so special?
I think also more his interior sides. Like, I mean, first, I think he's really intelligent. I will say that if I compare him to maybe others, his work ethic to be there and to participate, actually, like Adrienne said with Wizard, that made me smile, because there's definitely horses like that. And I think Sanseo as well. He's just one that really participates and is interested in it. Also, what I love, he's really interested in his thinking way. Like, he really zones in and listens, and yeah. So that, I think that's his big qualities. And also like Salvino too, that you can rely on him. Like, even like I always say, that he can be a little funny sometimes with mares, and it definitely can show in the test, but it won't, knock on wood, it won't show, or has not shown in the past ever, that he would make technical mistakes a lot. It would just show in his overall going with more tension. And I have to say that's a plus too, because again, I had also others that would throw a big mistake in there because they're way more loud about it, and not so participating, more on their own.
Mm-hmm. Here's an interesting question. Do you think horses get jet lag?
That's interesting. Maybe Adrienne has lots of experience.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if time zones say affect them because they sleep so much less than us, but for sure, just the exhaustion of the travel. I mean, when you've flown with these horses, especially, it's the duration of the flight is a fraction of the duration of their whole day. By the time you take them out of their stall, put them on the van to get to the airport, to go to the holding facility, to get on the plane, to sit on the tarmac for 2 hours, to get to where you're going, to get unloaded, the process of that entire day is just so long. And then of course they're in a new environment and they're not going to sleep well. So for sure, I think I always plan enough time that you need to be able to get there. They'll be really excited for the first 2 days usually, and then often they'll crash on about day 3 or 4 and come back up, or the other way. They'll be really tired at first and then kind of pull themselves out of it. So I always try to plan to give them at least that time so that you're not then asking them to start to compete when they're just finally starting to kind of level off their emotions and their sleep and getting back in a routine.
We've talked so much about the very top levels. You both teach, and if you were to give, maybe my question is, when you're doing clinics with your sort of average riders, what do you think are the areas that people are missing? Is that too broad a question? Okay,
no, I can answer that, because what I don't ever kind of go in with a plan of what I'm going to work on, because usually you don't know the riders you're going to work on. But I find more often than not, I end up trying to give a better explanation of connection. And that's something Debbie focuses on a lot. Like how do we get them to go and hold that contact in just the right way, to where their mouths are closed, and how is that a reflection of everything else that's going on in their body? And to me, that's always a really big indicator. If they have a busy, fussy mouth, not just that it's incorrect, but that's for me telling me that mentally they're a little bit in anxiety too. And so just with even the most basic lower level of riders, I usually find it coming back to trying to find ways to establish a proper connection.
Anything to add, Sabine?
No, I think, yeah, for sure. That's a big thing. I don't know. Often when you say also, what's also often, I think, overseen or not paid enough attention to is that we remember our positions, because that is really the language. We talk through, it's not verbally language, but how does a leg function? It's not just there to go forward, but it has so many other aspects. And then also the magic, how between the three, your seat, your leg, and your hand, how they work together, because there is no formula. I think that's a big magical thing to figure out and to help in that area. But also that's already a step ahead, but just to even have a correct and effective position is something I often see and work on. And then again, how the three work together, and that is so personal, of course. Everybody has a different, but tapping into that.
We're bouncing around a little bit because I'm asking some of the questions from our audience. What did your horses do after they came back from the Olympics? Was there a rest period?
I tried to just keep, obviously no movements. I recently started doing some movements and was laughing, said the last time he did that was in Tokyo. So but I kept him going gently, that's what I meant earlier too, when you not doing every day the same, you can still be in the ring, but change it up. So first of all, I lowered all the expectations also of how much quality even if I just do walk, trot, canter. So I brought that all the way down, but there was not a month just out in pasture. And I forgot to say earlier, I also do have a water treadmill, so he does go a lot in there as well.
Adrienne, what did your guys do when they came back?
Yeah, he had a pretty good break. I promised him 2 weeks of not messing with him. So I didn't put a saddle on him for 2 weeks. He went on the walker, he hand grazed. But they're so surrounded by people constantly, when you're in like a situation like the games, the therapists and the laser and the this and the that, all to make them perform. But I feel like he was so ready to just have nobody in a stall for a while. So I gave him 2 weeks of just totally leaving him alone. And then we just did a whole bunch of trail riding. We didn't even start really back to work for probably 2 months after it before we even really went back in the ring. And then, like Sabine said, I do a lot of fitness trotting, which when you see him trotting around like that, you would not think he's an Olympic horse. So it's just kind of also fun, because then you just know that all you have to do is sit and, one little cluck and he's back up here. But just to keep him fit without expecting, him to move like a 9 in all those months, because they can't move like that forever.
How did you all choose the music for set up your freestyles?
Well, mine, Adrienne, go ahead, because
Okay.
mine is not exciting.
I more kind of just thought of like what emotion I guess I wanted for the music with Salvino. I work with Terry Gallo. She's made all my freestyles. With Wizard, when we did his, I was much younger and I wanted something that was like just really fun and that like music that I would dance to. And then for Salvino, I just kind of thought, okay, what emotions? I think he needs something that's a little bit more like powerful but subtle. And then we honestly just sat in the tack room one day and went through a whole bunch of different music options, and I ended up kind of being drawn towards almost like a gospel-y feel. I thought that type of music was really powerful and still accentuated him. And then we were able to find some kind of more rock songs that were done in a gospel-y way, I guess I would say. So it was just a lot of messing around with music, and I always have music playing when I ride. And so like there's many times when I'll stop and I like pull out my phone, like, what song is playing? And I, jot it down. I have a list on my phone of possible freestyle songs that's, a million miles long every time I hear something that I like.
And
So,
sorry, sticking with Adrienne a moment, because some of these people haven't done freestyles. You work with a professional freestyle maker.
Yes.
And do you send her, do you plan your pattern and then she puts the music to it? Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. I always plan the pattern first because the technical side of it is the most important. And so I think about, okay, what is his highlights? What does he struggle at? How can I make the things that he struggles at presented in an easier way? And how can I highlight the things that he's really good at? And now we have this online computer program for the degree of difficulty score. So that's made it a lot more black and white. If you're looking to make a difficult freestyle, you will spend hours just playing on this computer and figuring out, okay, here's kind of my rough thought, but now there's a bunch of different ways I can tweak it. And you put the movements in and you see how the numbers just go up and down by, 0.1, but it all makes a difference in the end. So the pattern is the first thing you get, and ride through it enough till you really are happy with the pattern. Then I film it and send it to the professional, the lady who puts the music to it. And there's a whole bunch of different levels of quality, or I guess of also expense. They can put together a freestyle just more by splicing songs and doing it on a much lower level budget. For Salvino's, we actually had the whole thing. Once we picked the music, they had sheet music written for it, and then it was all composed live. So it all flows together when it's done like one really beautiful piece of music. But of course, you wouldn't reserve that for, that would only be reserved for something that would warrant that expense.
So how long a period from beginning to end do you think it took?
Oh, I'd say a good 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah. So what about yours?
Yeah, so the one I wrote in Tokyo is a freestyle from 2018. That was the year that was Senseo's and my first year, or his, at Grand Prix. And I had it done, I think, for Nations Cup I wrote in Florida. And because it was his first year, it had a quite easy floor plan. I did it myself, and then my husband did the music. And I love, when I think about the music, I do love a lot like movie music, because in a movie, when you make music, you have to underline emotions that go with the scene. So I'm always very attracted by that. and not necessarily the soundtrack, but the music that plays throughout the movie. But now, yeah, I am working on a professional freestyle with someone, and it's the same way. We're doing first the floor plan, but I also learned that this movie music was a little overpowering for Sanseo, I thought, looking back or seeing him now. And I want to pick something a little bit lighter and more elegant that suits him. And I think that's how I would normally go with the horses, a little bit, see what suits their way of going. And I do think you can see a little bit in every horse some sort of their personality, and would pick it based on that. But it is a long process. I'm like really bad at it.
Going back to Tokyo, what was the environment like for the horses?
Really
Was it a good setup?
Yeah, amazing. Really, really great. Stalls, yeah. Adrienne, help me.
Yeah, look, for starters, all the barns were air conditioned and climate controlled, which was amazing. And their brand new barns, the mats were like beautifully, everything was just like, every detail was perfect. But having the air conditioning, I think, was the biggest thing, because they can handle training in the heat for a little bit. It's the standing in the heat 24 hours a day that really is exhausting for them and the people. So having the climate controlled just made it super comfortable. The whole venue was really well thought out for horses. There's plenty of arenas. All the footing was exceptional in all the arenas. There was a hacking path, kind of like a racetrack size, with a few cross-country jumps and grass in between, plenty of room to hand graze, plenty of room to hack your horse and give them a little bit of a break. So for sure, it was very well thought out with the horse's welfare in mind.
You both have been in the dressage world for quite a while. What do you see as the most positive changes, maybe for horses and riders, over the course of your dressage career? Or are there any changes?
I just, at least something, it's interesting to kind of always watch from the international standpoint, the sways and riding style, I would guess, and different methods. And I think we're definitely it's definitely going in a way, I feel like, right now, to where they're rewarding very correct, very classical riding. I think if you took any of the top rides at Tokyo, they were just really elegant. The horses, it was light, it was correct, it was really beautiful. And that's really fun to see. It's been fun to hear that we are now being told the Americans have a style of riding, which is known to be, again, light and correct and classical. And to hear that from Europeans is really cool, because when I first started out, I don't think that was something that would have been coined, so to hear we're not just riding like the Germans or like the British, but we're riding in our American style is really neat.
Yeah, I heard that a lot too, from feedback from coaches that I work with in Germany. And I mean, that was definitely something that was pointed out as the American style, that we ride correct tests, good positions, and yeah, good, elegant riding. Yeah.
Well, as someone who's been in it longer than either of you, when I started out, of course, it was the big, heavy Christine Stuckelberger and Granat thundering around and watching the evolution from one sort of successful to another. I mean, what a thrill to see you all in Tokyo. Such beautiful, beautiful riding.
But that's a great point you're making too, because the horses have changed so much.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
If you think at the very beginning, it wasn't even a woman's sport. Like back in the day, they said the man had to
military
train and then put the woman on. I mean, so that's an interesting point you're making. And I definitely still know, when I learned at Bimmermann's, how different the horses were. I mean, it was much more physical riding, and yeah, so that part is also super fun to see, with how much less things can get done nowadays.
And I think we went through a period where we saw so much tension, and the relaxation that we saw in Tokyo was just breathtaking. It was just fabulous. Well, of course, I work, and a lot of the people on this call are young riders. Do you have any advice for like our teenage type riders, young riders on that are looking to stay in the dressage world? Many of them dreaming that they'll one day be on a call like this because they've been to the Olympics. Any advice to give these young people?
For me, I think keeping in mind like why you started it, because it's an ongoing challenge to not have the business aspect take you maybe a little bit away from the love and the passion about the horses. I mean, it's a natural thing. I have to watch that always to really stay authentic and pure to that and make good decisions that how do I say that keep the fire in you for the passion of the animal and the horse and the love for dressage, and not be have a hard time explaining it, taking it from the business side that it takes you the wrong direction.
Adrienne, anything to add?
I would always like to just let people know if they're anything like me, to where they had this incredible passion, but didn't even really see where the bridge to all this elite sport was, that it is still very much possible. You don't need to have self-funded. You don't need to be able to afford the really nice horses, especially at a young age. I went to juniors on a horse that I bought from the rodeo circuit. She was a bucking horse and was able to, just do enough that I could qualify for my region. And we always got, pretty close to last place and everything. But I got experience, and I was able to just keep pocketing away all this experience riding all these sorts of horses, and not in any way, shape, or form being the shining star of my age level through the ranks. But then when the opportunity did come along to be able to sit on some horses of real quality, I had put in all the work and gotten all this experience that when that horse did come into my life, I was able to make something of it. And so I think that, and just knowing that people are watching, even if you think they aren't watching, and they're watching the little things like, you don't have to be out there waving your banner and saying, I'm the best. You can be the one who's taking care of your horse and sweeping your barn aisle and showing up 5 minutes before everyone else and watching other people's lessons, and all those little things. They actually do get noticed, even if at the time you think nobody sees you.
Just curiosity, Adrienne, how old were you when you rode your first Prix St. George?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I'd have to look that up online.
Vague. I mean, were you a teenager? Were you in your 20s?
Yeah, I did young riders, so
okay.
So it would have been just somewhere around there. But again, not well. riding it well are two very different things. I actually think I think now that you said this, I think I had my first Prix St. George read to me because I didn't know that you couldn't have a reader. And I think I got eliminated. So not a highlight.
Sabine, how old were you when you did your first Prix St. George?
It was in 2000. So I'm
Good memory.
Well, I remember because I've not ridden in Germany. So I moved here in 98, and then I know the first couple of years I had to make a test out of this horse that could do little pieces of things. But yeah, so it was in 2000.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, this has been terrific. Thank you all so very, very much, Alexa, Adrienne, Sabine.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate your giving us your time, and best of luck. We've got our fingers crossed for you, of course, for the World Games. And
all right.
here's to a great season.
Thank you.